Hello and welcome to the Benjamin Z. Meller Investor Networking Group. We have a great presentation today. We're going to talk about trusts and how they can be so useful in investing. So let's go ahead and go over the goals of the presentation. We're going to explain what is a trust. We're going to compare some of the different types of trusts. We're going to do a comparison also of how trusts are used in different countries. So we're not going to only talk about the United States. We'll talk about some other countries. We're going to give a few examples of some famous trusts. I'm also going to discuss some less well-known trusts, and then we'll show how you can create a trust in the US. So trusts, they originate, they're a little bit different based on what part of the world that you're in. And we have a map here that shows jurisdictional variations in law. So there's civil law countries, and these are shown in blue. If you see blue, this is a civil law country in blue. And if you see this other color, the darker color, kind of a reddish color, these are actually common law. So in the United States and Canada, also Australia, common law is more prevalent. And the common law, it originates from a history where there's judicial decisions and precedents that are set. Whereas civil law, which is shown by the blue colored countries, this actually originates from Roman law, and it's prevalent throughout the Europe and Asia, and that's kind of where you find it. But this is important related to trust, because if you look at this table here, it shows where are you going to find common law versus civil law countries. Well, the common law countries, the laws are mostly coming from court decisions and precedents, whereas in civil law countries, which are more common in Europe, you get codified statutes and laws. So some examples of common law countries: the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, Ireland. Or if you're on a civil law country, you're talking about France, Germany, Japan, Ukraine, Norway. These are some civil law countries. Now we get into where do you find trusts within these countries? Well, the UK is a common law country, and they do recognize trusts. The US is also a common law country, and yes, trusts are recognized. If you go to France, Germany, Brazil, Japan, or Ukraine, these are all civil law countries. And in France, Germany, and Brazil, no, trusts are not recognized. But in Japan and Ukraine, they have limited recognition. So you need to know where you can use these. This is a nice illustration, and it shows what is a trust. It shows some of the assets here. You could have stocks, bonds, real estate, cash, whatever it might be. You could put it into the trust. Now, if you are the one that is conveying the assets into the trust, you are by definition the grantor. You also could be called the trustor. So if they're your assets and you're conveying them to the trust, by definition, you're the trustor, you're the grantor. These assets are conveyed into the trust, and that means that the legal title, the name of the owner of record, needs to change. So if you put a piece of real estate into a trust, it needs to show that the trust is the owner. And then you've got beneficiaries of the trust. So that, you could, for example, create a trust, and your beneficiaries could be your children. The advantages to a trust are in some cases, you can lower real estate taxes. Another big advantage is you can potentially avoid probate. It does offer some protection from creditors in certain instances. There's a lot of advantages to trusts. They also offer more anonymity. So big advantages there for trusts. So what would be some reasons that people might use trusts? How could you actually use a trust? Well, you could use a trust for estate planning. Maybe you are a parent and you have a child. You could set up a revocable living trust, and you could pass on the family home, the primary residence, to your children, so that when you die, let's say you fall over from a heart attack from working too many hours at the office and you die, with that trust in place, your children will not have to go through probate. So that's a big advantage. Your kids will appreciate the fact that you did that, even though it took you a little bit of extra work. Asset protection. Let's imagine that you're a dentist. Maybe you're a dentist and you have a patient that is going around filing lawsuits and he decides to sue you and he wins a judgment. Well, if you have placed your assets into an irrevocable trust before you're a party to the lawsuit, before that ever happened, you are in a much better position in terms of being protected. You can also set up a trust for special needs planning. Maybe you're a parent, you have a child that has perhaps a disability, they need some sort of care or something like that. Maybe you have a child that is got some sort of a drug problem and you can't safely give them their inheritance because they may spend it all on drugs. Well, you can set up a special needs planning trust in that case so that it doesn't all get squandered as soon as you pass away. If you want to do it for pension planning, there's advantages there. A lot of reasons to use a trust. There's different types of trusts, and we have a short amount of time, so I'm not going to go through all of them in detail. I just want you to be aware that the main ones that you hear about are the revocable trust and the irrevocable trust. So revocable trust, I mean, it means that you can put the assets in and then take the assets out. An irrevocable trust is once you transfer the assets, you can't transfer them out. There's an asset protection trust. These are used to provide protection from creditors. And there's all sorts of other trusts that are out there. Again, there's differences in the countries. A good example is Germany. If you look at Germany, they offer a special type of, it's as close to a trust as you can get in maybe the US or the UK. They offer what is called Treuhand, that's what I meant to say, Treuhand. And it is actually a type of fiduciary agreement. Treu in German means loyal, and then Hunt means hand, Treuhand. So loyal hand, that's what it's actually translating as. So you're entrusting your assets to some loyal person. And then Ukraine does not commonly use trust. The US and the UK, we have wide trust usage. It's quite common there. All sorts of reasons that you can use them. You can use them for special needs, planning, asset protection. Another term that you may hear is grantor trust. Well, what the heck is a grantor trust? Well, it's just a legal entity where the grantor or the settler retains certain powers over the trust assets. So remember, if you put the assets into the trust, you're the grantor. So a grantor trust, you still have some control over the assets. That can be an advantage to them. Some of the less well-known trusts, boy, there's a lot of trusts out there. There's gun trust. That's a very less well-known one where you could address issues surrounding the ownership of firearms. Maybe an art trust. Maybe you have a nice art collection and you want it handled in a certain way. You could deed it into, you could transfer the assets into a trust. There's a blind trust, which is quite commonly used by politicians so that they can avoid the conflicts of interest where they're making laws and they have access to information. If they have put their assets in a blind trust where somebody else supposedly manages their assets, it provides them with certain advantages there. A lot of famous trusts, I encourage you to read up on these. They're very interesting to learn about the history. There's the Rockefeller Foundation. There's the J. Paul Getty Trust, which was actually set up. It's dedicated to the visual arts. Everybody's heard of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is focused on global health and education. Then the Walton Family Trust, Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart. It is focused on education reform. So the trust can be set up for all sorts of reasons. Here is a famous trust. This is Leona Helmsley. She set up a trust. And when she died at the age of 87, she was quite famous or infamous, as you like, in New York. And she set up the Leona and Harry Helmsley Charitable Trust. And they were estimated to be somewhere around 4 to 8 billion in assets that could be one of the, huge trust. But she took very good care, actually, of her dog in that trust, which is kind of a funny story. She was real concerned about her dog and made plans for that. The John D. Rockefeller Trust, that's another great trust. It's over the years, it's been involved in a lot of philanthropic activities. Really, really interesting. The Ford Foundation Trust, some people don't know this, but the Ford Foundation Trust was actually established in 1936 by Edsel Ford, who was the son of the founder of Ford, Henry Ford. And when it was set up initially, it only had $25,000, but it has grown just exponentially since 1936. So really, really amazing growth. The J. Paul Getty Trust, it's another trust that it aims to further knowledge and critical seeing through the growth and preservation of its collections. They're involved with a lot of programs. It has an endowment of 7.7 billion. So another term that you may hear, especially in the real estate investing world, if you're in the United States, is land trust. Well, you hear land trust if you're talking to knowledgeable real estate investors. If somebody starts talking about a land trust, what in the world are they talking about? Well, it's just when you take title to a piece of property, when you're purchasing a piece of property, instead of you as the buyer taking the title in your name, you take title to it in a land trust. So the seller will deed the property to a land trust that you create. It's a legal entity that is created to hold title to the real estate. And one of the big benefits of land trusts is they offer privacy. And it's because technically the trust holds title to the property. You don't hold the title to the property. And the beneficiary of the trust, the one that gets the benefit of the trust, that's not public record. That beneficiary is in a file cabinet, not filed somewhere for public record. So definitely an important thing to know about land trusts. Another great trust, especially in the world that we're living in, where we are so close to curing human aging. You know, we may be just a few years away from finally having a way to reverse the age of people. But if you're in the unfortunate situation where you pass away before they can cure aging and offer biological immortality, if you set up an irrevocable life insurance trust, you can make the beneficiary of that trust not only for example, it could be not only your family, but you could also allocate a portion of the life insurance proceeds to a company that does cryogenics. So if you prefer to be preserved instead of being buried in the ground or cremated, because at least if you take that option, you have a chance of being brought back to life. If you're cremated, you don't have that chance. And if you're buried in the ground, you don't have that chance. But if you're cryopreserved, you may very well. Well, this is a great thing that can be done now. It's an actionable thing that you can do now. And definitely something that I encourage you to think about. How do you set up a trust? It's easy. The best way is you find a lawyer in your geographic area and have them help you if it's your first time doing it. Once you know how to do it, it's quite easy to do. But basically, you're just going to identify the type, the purpose of the trust. Why are you setting it up? You're going to decide what kind of trust it is. You're going to select who's the trustee. That needs to be someone you trust. You have to draft the trust agreement, or if you're having a lawyer do it, they can do it. And then you fund the trust. Funding the trust means you go back and you change the title, you change the ownership of your properties to the trust, or your business could be owned by the trust, but you have to actually change it. Just setting up the trust does nothing if you don't retitle the assets in the name of the trust. And then you just you've got it set up, and that's basically it. You can put a bank account in a trust. You can put real estate in a trust. What are the documents required? Well, for the US, you need a trust deed agreement. You need a certificate of trust, and you need a tax identification number. For the US. And for the UK, you need a letter of wishes, tax forms, and a trust deed. Each country is a little bit different, but process is relatively similar. The most popular states for trusts in the United States are Nevada, Delaware, South Dakota, Alaska, and Wyoming. A lot of people know Wyoming because they're popular for the LLCs, but Nevada is quite popular as well for setting up trusts. And I encourage you, if you're setting up a trust in the United States, you want to consider these states first. What do the documents look like? Well, if you want to see what they look like, you can just go to Law Depot and then select contracts and living trust. I mean, you'll be able to see an example of what they look like there. Okay, that is it. And I want to make a couple of announcements. Please fill out the sign-in sheet. It's a good idea to include your contact information. And by the way, if you are seeing this on the internet, we have these meetings every Sunday. And if you would like to get an invitation, just email me, ben@benjaminzmiller.com. And if any of you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit or be interested in this investor networking group, and we have hundreds of investors now from all over Europe and Americas, so it's definitely a great opportunity for you. We have a new Telegram channel, so proud to bring that to you. So if you want to get updates more frequently, you can subscribe to, go to Telegram and then do Benjamin Z. Miller _ notice that's an _ investing. Just add that on and you'll be getting lots of updates. I hope that helps. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then I'm going to open it up for any questions.